So this is our time to ask questions and get some answers. So I know the beginning of the school year can be kind of confusing. Hopefully it's gone well for you and your child, but a lot of times questions are starting to pop up. I know I've been real busy going to IEP meetings these last few weeks, and I've also gone to 3 facilitated IEP meetings since school has started, which is more than I usually do this time of year. So that's interesting. So if you have questions about facilitated IEP meetings, we can talk about that today. Say hi so I can welcome you. Today, there's no specific topic because it's all about you and your questions. So I like to have at least once a month in our group here the opportunity for you guys to ask your questions. Okie dokie. And then we also have, so 3 lucky people today are going to win a Love Yourself card from Louise Hay. So at the end, or we might sprinkle that in between, we will have 3 drawings for people to win their own affirmation card. So what are your questions? What has been going on? What would you love to talk about? Let me get a drink here. Water. I'm not a coffee person. Well, I don't see any questions coming in yet, so I can start talking about some of the questions that have come up at recent meetings that I've been with families. So Elizabeth, yes, love the mug. So what's it say? Hello, my name is that parent who knows there's no prerequisite to belonging. And you can get one of these mugs yourself, or we have some others too. If you're interested, let me know. I'll give you the link. So Elizabeth, do you have a question? And we can start talking about that. The other thing is I can just also share with you some questions that have come up at recent meetings. So one was about consent for assessment. So what we had learned is that a lot of times teachers will fill out a consent for an evaluation, and they'll have all these little boxes marked off. And usually there's not much written description for what a parent is giving consent for. So my suggestion as an advocate is to always, in writing, request an evaluation team meeting. Now, evaluation team meetings are not required under IDEA. You could check your state regs and see if they're required there. And a lot of times they don't really happen on a formal basis. What mostly happens is the special ed teacher will think about the testing that she or he needs to do, and they'll check that. And maybe the special ed teacher will contact the related service people like the speech language, OT, whoever else is working with your child. And they'll say, what test do you think you want to give? And they'll check those areas. And a lot of times it's just sent home in your child's backpack for you to sign. It really needs to be informed consent, which means that you really understand what you're giving permission for. And so what I want to caution parents with is to make that request when you know your child is up for an evaluation, to sit down with the school members of the evaluation team. You are a member of the evaluation team, even though you might not have realized that. And the whole purpose of having everybody together is to say, let's look at what information we already have. what information do we think we still need in order to make some good decisions about eligibility or about what should be in the new IEP. And then there should be a discussion about what areas need to be assessed and what they're kind of predicting that what instruments they would use. So one of the things that a lot of parents don't understand is that when the cognitive testing is checked and when you give permission for that, you are giving permission for your child to have an IQ test. Now, depending on you, depending on your philosophy, depending on your values, your child, an IQ test might just be perfect, and that will help you learn more about your child. For some parents, for some children, an IQ test isn't going to be that helpful as far as giving you recommendations of how that student learns best or what would be some appropriate goals for the student. So please, before you sign consent for any evaluations, ask for that team evaluation meeting. Go and talk with the team about that. And you only have to give consent for the tests that you think are appropriate, that will give valid information about your child. It's not an all or nothing. You can sign consent for certain tests and not give consent for other tests. So just so you realize that that's out there. And AK with us, he says, thank you. Elizabeth says, I'm also working as an advocate, been having a lot of issue in my school district. The school is not allowing full inclusion. I know. And, this is, one, inclusion is defined differently by lots of people, right? Two, the term full inclusion can be defined in many ways too. Now, I was talking to a mom. I'm in Idaho, but I work with families around the country. And I was talking to a mom in Colorado, and she was saying, physically, her son is in the general ed classroom. However, he's not included as far as participating and being an active learner in that general ed classroom. So it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen that Michael Giangreco cartoon. I could post it in here afterwards, where it's a cartoon drawing of a classroom, and at the back of the classroom is this sandy island with a palm tree and a separate table with a para and a student working, and it's called The Island in the Mainstream. And unfortunately, that's what happens a lot. So, Elizabeth, I don't know if you'd like, I have a one-page sheet that talks about recent research about inclusion and how it benefits not only the student with the disability, but the other students, and I think there's, I don't know, at least maybe 8-10 different recent research articles, and I just kind of give a really short synopsis. So Elizabeth or other people watching this live or on the replay, let me know if you're interested in that, and I can give you the link to that PDF. And I also realized I never introduced myself. If you're new here, I'm Charmaine Tanner. And as an advocate, my passion is to help you as a parent become a more effective advocate for your child, because I really believe that all kids are competent, all kids can learn more, and with the proper supports and services, they can be learning in that general ed classroom. As a parent, my son Dylan has Down syndrome, and he was what I would say fully included 100% of his day in general ed classes. And I saw that as such a rich environment. And as a teacher, both a special ed teacher and a general ed teacher, I really can see the difference in that general ed classroom is such a more rich environment for learning to happen. So I'm thrilled that people are still wanting to advocate for that. And Elizabeth says, please do. Yeah, so I'll post that in after the show. And if anybody else wants it, let me know. And I also, I think I've done a short video on different ways to advocate for inclusion. Because the thing is, I think a lot of times as advocates, as parents, we come to the table with, look what research says about inclusion, but we don't see anybody really reacting much to that, right? It's kind of a glazed over. Yeah. We've heard all about this research. So I think we need this multi-dimension approach to advocating for inclusion. And one of the concepts that's helped me is to think like a marketer would think of, if inclusion was this product that you were selling to people, how would you sell inclusion? And so there's a variety of ways that we really can do that with gathering more folks. So it's not just a special interest group that's advocating for inclusion. We want to make sure that we also have parents and students without disabilities that are speaking up for inclusion, that are coming to school board meetings. So we want to expand that circle of allies that we have that are proponents of inclusion, and have conversations with, staff, administrators, school board members, and looking at what their objections are, and being able sometimes to predict what those objections are, and being able to have different, I don't want to say like script, but different things that you say to different stakeholder groups. So the Board of Education a lot of times is interested in saving money or not spending as much money, and also test scores in the school district. So for you, if you're talking to a school board member, you want to be talking about how inclusion is not more costly, how test scores do go up. So you pinpoint your message to the group that you're talking to. So Jennifer is here with us, and Jennifer's got a question, and she said, I didn't realize your son had Down syndrome. My son also has Down syndrome, and I'm a teacher. So isn't that cool? It's like fun to see. Yeah, I was a special ed teacher for 15 years. And then I was always in these IEP meetings giving suggestions to classroom teachers about how kids could be included. And I thought, I've never been a classroom teacher. Can this inclusion really work? So I thought I should transfer to the classroom and make sure all these accommodations and ideas I'm coming up with really help kids and work in the classroom. And I loved being in that general ed environment and having this community of kids. So I wound up staying the rest of my career. 15 years was a special ed teacher, 15 years as a general ed teacher. And yes, inclusion works, even when you have like 29 kids in a class. So yes, and Jennifer asked about alternatives to a novel study in grade 3, besides asking the teacher to study novels that are movies. So this is a great question, Jennifer. And, this pertains to, right, any grade level of, from 3rd grade up, probably the students are going to be reading more novels instead of like a basal, reading book. And so there are a lot of alternative books out there. And so if you do some searching, and I can also give you some links, but there are, if you search on the title, like Pinterest, believe it or not, has a lot of alternative novels. So your child can read the same novel, but it's on a different level. If your school has a Bookshare account, a lot of times you can get novels there that are what the teacher's going to be reading. and your child can get the audio version. For a lot of kids, their listening comprehension is higher than their reading comprehension. So an audio book might be appropriate. It depends on your child. And then Nicole Eric Dix has I forget if it's a SlideShare, but it's like one of those group public, websites where she's been collecting different modified, not only, modified novels, but other kinds of modifications. And she's been collecting a lot. So when we get done with the live show, I can put in Nicole's link for that document that she's been collecting. And Anne says, yes, inclusion works great with proper supports and structure. Exactly. And I think that's, sometimes when kids are included in general ed and that structure and the supports aren't there and things kind of fall apart, then unfortunately inclusion gets, kind of a bad rep. And you can hear from teachers and administrators that will say, oh, we tried inclusion and it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work when you don't have all that structure. And people know, what their responsibility is, what their role is going to be. So there's a lot of, kind of foundation work that the school needs to do. It's really tough to be in a building that has a resource teacher. And then you also want to have this inclusive model, but the resource teacher, has this commitment to these kids that are coming to her class. She's also supposed to be in general ed classes. So a lot of times schools that really look at their entire staff and reallocate staff have the best, outcomes. I know when my son was in elementary school, what they did is they took their speech therapist, the gifted and talented teacher, the Title I teacher, the special ed teacher, the speech person, and they all became this team that cross-trained each other in different, areas. And so one person was assigned one grade level. Instead of having to serve the whole school, they divided their staff up that way. So, and I'm getting this message that says I have to click to reconnect to Facebook. So I'm going to do that. If I disappear for a minute, hold tight and I'll be back. And I'll keep talking in case. Up. And Jennifer, if you want to type in some of the novels that the third graders are going to read this year, I can also look and see if I can quickly pull some resources for you. I don't know. A lot of times, each grade level has like certain books that they read. So, I would get a list from the general ed teacher. So throughout the year, you can be looking for other kinds of resources. And, there are some parents that have gone ahead and made adaptive books. And that's where sometimes, like I said, in the Pinterest group, or Jennifer, if you're in the educational strategies for children with Down syndrome, Lisa's Facebook group, you can put a post in there. And a lot of times people will have suggestions or, things that they've already made that's out there. So you don't have to reinvent that wheel. But that's really important, I think, for our kids to be reading the same novel. It doesn't have to be the exact one. It can be one of those high interest, low vocabulary, adaptive novel. But that's really important that we look at a variety of curriculum resources when we're planning inclusion, right? And when we want to be supporting kids in class. So thanks for your questions. What else are you guys thinking about? And what else are you wondering about? I think what we'll do is we'll do our first drawing. So I have 3 love yourself. I call them affirmation cards from Louise Hay. So I'm going to close my eyes and scroll through the comments and pick our first winner. Okay. So drum roll. Who can do the drum roll? And Jennifer, you're the first one. So Jennifer, I want you to pick number 3, number 2, or number 1. And then I'll read it to you. So which one do you pick, Jennifer? 1, 2, or 3? They're all beautiful, magical things. So let's see what Jennifer's going to pick. Oh. And yes, super good. So I'm glad you're here. Okay, Jennifer's picking 3. So let's see what 3 says. Number 3 says, wellness is the natural state of my body. That's a good one. And then on the back, it says, my body communicates with me and I am willing to listen and understand its messages. So Jennifer, this is for you. I'm going to put your name on it. Send me a private message with your mailing address and I will get it in the mail to you. And then we'll have another drawing here in a few minutes. So who else has a question? Question. The other thing that came up today in a conversation with a parent, and Jennifer, you might be also interested in this because when kids are in 3rd grade, it kind of seems like that's the tipping point when the IEP team will want to talk about alternative state assessments, because in most states, 3rd grade is that first year when state assessments are happening. So Jennifer, I don't know if you've had that discussion with your child, since you were asking about 3rd grade novels. I do, and I don't know if I brought it in here. No, I do have a really good recent article about just because a student is taking the alternative state assessment does not mean that they need to be served more in the special ed room. What I'm finding a lot is when students are approaching 3rd grade, or if they have, they'll have an IEP meeting in the fall of 3rd grade, and the team will be talking about whether or not your child qualifies for taking the alternative assessment. Basically, it's supposed to be just for students with significant cognitive disabilities. IDEA doesn't define what a significant cognitive disability is, but generally most states are looking at only 1% of their students who are on IEPs would probably be considered significantly cognitively disabled. So a lot of kids with Down syndrome, that's, the choice that they kind of are, persuaded to be in that alternative state assessment track. The concerns that I have is so many times what I've seen then is the expectations for that child are lowered. Because most criteria in most states talk about a student who needs functional academics, which to me is another kind of code word for life skills. And as a parent, a teacher, and an advocate, I've never been a fan of life skills and that, folding towels for the kitchen or counting plastic coins or going to a restaurant or going shopping in the grocery store, things that parents can do, things that kids can do at home. So my caution when you look at the alternative assessment is, are you going to be kind of endorsing a lower expectation for your child? It depends on your school and the staff. My son took alternative assessments, and we still had high expectations. He was still fully included all throughout schooling. But that's kind of that caveat of being careful about that. So if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about alternative state assessments, let me know in the comments and I can come back and give you the link for that article. It's really good. So Anne says, I do not believe our schools have an alternative standardized test, but my oldest was always provided a quiet room. So yes, so, and that depends. What state are you from, Anne? Because a lot of states, they have, the state content standards, the academic content standards, but then a lot of states will also have, they're called different things like expected learning or expanded learning outcomes or alternative content standards. And so if your state has those alternative content standards, then most likely they also have an alternative test. And there's always been this big debate about testing. And so Anne says that she's in Kentucky. So yeah, so I could look up some other stuff about Kentucky. But what we have found is that, there's still the controversy of standardized testing for any student. Parents and some staff and other, people in the education world, the plus of having all of our students take standardized tests is that it still shows the classroom teachers and the special ed teacher how important it is to make sure that we're teaching academic skills to our kids. Now, I don't know why I'm getting this message. I have to reconnect. So if I disappear for a minute, I'm coming. Again. So Anne also said, I taught my kids life skills before high school, so we could say no thank you to life skill classes in high school. Yes, you and I are very similar, Anne, because it's like, and I know even in middle school, and Dylan was in general ed classes, but if they had a field trip, they were always saying, well, does Dylan want to come on the field trip? We're going to go to, walk down to Pizza Hut and order our lunch. Well, the thing is, the time that the special ed class was all migrating down to the Pizza Hut was a time when Dylan had a regular general ed class. And it's like, why would he miss this general ed class? We go to, restaurants as a family. He knows, we help him like read the menu, figure out what he wants. He does the ordering, all that. We do that as a family. We don't want to take away academic time for them to work on that. So yeah, that's just something that you have to be kind of vocal about during IEP meetings, and help the school understand that there's other things that you want your child to be learning at school. And Anne says that he is high functioning and is at college in a well-supported environment. So how cool is that? What college is he going to? I know Kentucky's got some good post-secondary inclusive opportunities for kids. Our son, Dylan, who has Down syndrome, he audited classes at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs for 4 years. And he loved it. I mean, he saw his brother and sister going to college. He wanted to go to college. It took a lot of advocacy. It took having an ally in the special ed department on campus to help us talk with, person after person until we got to the vice chancellor level at the university. And we were able to have Dylan, like I said, audit classes, which isn't as good as getting credit, but considering this was 2007, and there was no formal program on campus. There is now to support students, but that was like a very exciting learning time for Dylan, and getting to know other kids on campus, doing homework. My husband and I did a lot of modifications of classes, but he took classes like Intro to Forensic Science, Ancient Civilization, because he loved studying about Egypt. He also took classes like rock and roll music and 3D art and Intro to Drama. So it's exciting, and I encourage parents of young kids to not, to like cross off that dream of your child going to college, because it really is still possible. So what other questions do you wonderful people have? So Anne is sharing. She said, Thomas More University near Cincinnati has an Institute of Learning Differences, which provides professional tutoring in each class each week, as well as a strategic learning specialist who provide weekly oversight. He loves it and works very hard. Isn't that cool? Yeah, so that's great. And like I said, it's if you're familiar with Think College, that's a wonderful website that you can go to and learn more about post-secondary opportunities. But in Idaho, where I live now, that's one of the things that we're working on, is to get some colleges and universities accepting and supporting students with intellectual and developmental disabilities to go to college. So that's exciting. I made a list of some other things. The other thing I was going to mention is about draft IEPs. So probably you all know it's a good strategy to ask for that draft IEP before the meeting, so you have time to digest it, write questions, make notes. And so many times we get the draft IEP within like a day or two before the meeting, right? So it's really compressed time for us to review it. One of the school districts that I work in a lot, I have a really good relationship with one of the supervisors, and we have found out, and she is convinced, that it's really helpful if we give the parent the draft IEP a couple of weeks ahead of time. So then the parent can review it, write in the questions, write in concerns that they have to the team. And then the team has like another few days to look at the parent input. And, it makes the meeting go more efficient. It's more meaningful parent input, instead of just us always reacting to an IEP draft. We can be more proactive. I know parents that will sit down with the staff before the draft is even written. And as a parent and staff members, they will, kind of draft that first language together. That's like the ultimate. If you can't get teachers together to do that, then I think the second best thing is to get the draft a couple weeks ahead of time, so you can give input and it can be, embedded in the IEP before you even come back to, or go to that first meeting. The trick with that is to give the teachers, several weeks heads up that you're going to be asking for it for a couple of weeks before the meeting. So many teachers, they're like really, really busy, and they only get the draft IEP written, real close to the actual IEP date. So if you want it further ahead, you need to give them, several weeks of a heads up about that. So what other questions do you guys have? If you're watching the replay, you can still type in your question, because I'll come back. And my other two cards fell on the floor. So let me get these. We have another drawing coming up. And okay, they fell on the floor. So we have number 1 and we have number 2 left. So I'm going to scroll through here with my eyes closed and see what comment I land on. And I land on Anne. So Anne, which number would you like? These are Love Yourself cards from Louise Hay. So Anne, would you like a 1 or a 2? A 1 and a 2. Sounds like Lawrence Welk. And now you know how old I am. Who had parents that watched Lawrence Welk on TV? So Anne, oh good. Anne picked number 1. Let me put this here. So number 1, Anne says, I appreciate others for who they are. And then the back says, I accept that I cannot learn from other people's lessons for them. I can hardly read. They must do the work themselves, and they do it when they are ready. It's like always so amazing when people pick these and they'll say, that's exactly like a right-on message for me. So I'm going to write, and I need something to write with. So Anne gets number 1. So you're welcome. We've got number 2 left. Okay. We got some people here with us live. If you haven't made a comment yet, make a comment, because I'm going to scroll through the comments and see who the lucky person is that gets number 2. And I landed on Anne again. So let me do another drawing or another roll through here. And we will see Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, if you're still with us live, this is your card, and I'll show it to you. It says, everything I do is a choice, so I am in control of my reality. And the other side says, the thoughts I choose to believe right now are forming my experiences, and I now listen to what I say and do not say anything that I do not want to become true for me. Okie dokie. That's a pretty heavy one too, right? Elizabeth, if you are still with us live, if you can send me a private message, and I will mail you your affirmation. And I'm going to scroll back here and see if we have any other things. And let's see. Okay, so Elizabeth did have this question that I didn't see. She said, the school told me that they do not have alternative standardized testing. Where can I find more information on this to take to the school? Great question. And I was just on this website, so I can put in the link for that. But also tell me what state you're in, Elizabeth, because depending on the state you're in, things change, right? So let me know the state, and I'll come back and put that link in here for you, because there's quite a few good articles about that now. All righty. I don't see any other questions in our chat box. Next Thursday, we will be here live. Every Thursday at noon Mountain Time, we have a show. And it's exciting because sometimes we have guest speakers. Sometimes it's a topic that we'll dive into and do a more thorough training. So I hope that you make Thursday afternoon a regular time to stop by at our Facebook page here. And until next Thursday, I will see you. And I'll be back in the group in a couple minutes to post those links that I promised you guys. So until next Thursday, I'm Charmaine Tanner. I want your child to be more happy, safe, and learning every day at school. So we can do this together and make a change, right? Thank you, Anne, for being here. Thank you, guys. And we shall see you next